Chapter 27:13, Fuyi's Requirement. 2. The entire idea of the invasion was from the Marshal and I. Our men were only carrying out their duties under our command. You should put all the blame on me. Can I offer a counter-proposal? I will tell you every secret that you want to know in exchange for their lives to be spared. As the chief offender, I shall stay behind for any sort of punishment that you have for me. How about that? Xueyi certainly did not expect that he would be so loyal to his men. All of a sudden, the hatred that she had for him was reduced by a little. Your second chance depends on your performance. With a nod, Guan Yining's eyes shone with delight. Great. What can I do? First, tell me everything that you know. Guan Yining hesitated. If he told them every secret that he knew, there would be nothing left for him to bargain with. Fuyi seemed to understand his concern. You can choose to trust us or have death befall your men. In fact, there is still hope for you if you cooperate fully. I shall decide the fate of your men based on the significance of the information that you choose to share. If it is of utmost importance, I will spare 100 lives. For every piece of general information, I will spare 10. If it is something trivial, only 1 life will be spared. At this point, there really was nothing Guan Yining could do, except to tell the truth. Many secrets were unfolded. For example, the practice of primary and secondary black magic started about 10,000 years ago by the royal family of the Blue Fox planet. Back then, a celestial master showed up just when they started mastering the practice of the primary and secondary black magic. The celestial master was competent, so he was assigned to assist the crown prince in governing the country. He performed splendidly. As an ambitious man with a plan, the crown prince was meant to succeed to the throne. However, the emperor went mad one day and thought that the crown prince was going to wrest the power from him, so the crown prince was suddenly convicted of treason and was sentenced to death. The crown prince had no choice but to leave the Blue Fox planet in search of somewhere safe. It was where the history of the Blue Fox family in Starry Crescent Land began. The invaders used to be a group of happy thieves on the Blue Fox planet, wandering in the vast universe with no rules and restrictions. One day, the Marshal and Guan Yining both shared the same dream where God bestowed a treasure into their eager hands. They were told that in a faraway land named the Starry Crescent Land was a magical stone known as the Starry Stone. They could harvest its immense energy and even become immortals by wearing the stone. They talked about the dream the next day and were surprised by their same encounter. Since then, both of them were motivated to get the stone. They did not really care about acquiring energy, but they wanted to live forever. Therefore, they began looking for the Starry Crescent Land based on the hints that God had left behind in their dreams. Very soon, they were able to locate a specific source of energy that was released by the Blue Fox family from afar, thence the invasion happened. Unfortunately, they did not manage to find the so-called Starry Stone. Instead, they were attracted by the otherworldly cultures of the Starry Crescent Land. They wanted to rule the land by right of conquest so that they could build their homes here. Fuyi listened quietly with occasional but important questions, and Guan Yining answered with everything that he knew. When the whole story was finally done, Fuyi rose and grasped Xueyi by the wrist. We should go and have a rest. Guan Yining was still worried. My lords, I have told you everything that I know. How many lives will you spare? He anxiously asked. Fuyi answered without even looking back, all of them. Guan Yining gasped in disbelief. All. Chapter 27:14, Fuyi's Requirement. 3. That is correct. Fuyi then took Xueyi away into another cabin where they could have a rest. He was exhausted after such an eventful day. Not to mention that he had been traveling for some time to get here. Also, he needed a private space to connect all of the hints and dots. Frozen, Guan Yining stood silently, unable to believe what he had just heard. Hey, my young lord, does your father always mean what he says? He asked Hao for reassurance. Certainly, his word is as good as a bond. The positive statement was what Guan Yining needed. He heaved a long sigh of relief before starting to question the validity of what he heard again. He then circled the room a few times before tripping himself up. Have you lost your mind? I am dizzy just looking at you. Guan Yening sighed. All right, I will stop circling the room. We should head back now. Right now. My young lord, would you like to rest as well? A child should not stay up too late. Di Hao shook his finger in disapproval. I am not tired, so I will stay here and enjoy the view. By the way, call me Mr. Hao and stop addressing me as a young lord. Guan Yening dared not argue with him. The view of the night sky was absolutely breathtaking in space. Guan Yening could not help but share with Di Hao everything about the constellations while slowly steered across the void. Stop talking and let me have a moment of silence. Di Hao did not appreciate the sharing session very much. Understandably, Guan Yening stopped talking. He would peek at Di Hao every once in a while. The boy was still sitting by the window and gazing intensely at the stars. He seemed to be deeply absorbed in his own thoughts. Sometimes, the boy could be seen using his fingers underneath the sleeves to make some predictions. The little boy did not seem so little anymore. In fact, he glowed with a vibrant state of power and authority. He was only a child, but his powerful aura was not to be underestimated. He was just like a god who was overseeing the world. Guan Yening was intimidated by the boy, but Di Hao did not care about Guan Yening at all and continued to observe the stars. He frowned a little. Many things had changed, but the ending still remained the same. His memories were still the same. He could not hold back a sigh of disappointment. His mission was not accomplished yet. Perhaps he still had a long way to go. His time-traveling experience was an accident, but he intended to make it count. The distance did not matter at first when they were in pursuit of the man. However, the return journey finally made Guan Yening realize how far they had actually gone. Even with such great speed, they would still need at least half a day to get back to Starry Crescent Land. When the last lapse was complete, he finally saw Starry Crescent Land from a distance. Relieved, he then decided to speed up but was halted by a sudden flash of blue light before his eyes. Something was about to collide with the ship. Guan Yening was shocked by the sudden obstruction. By the time he realized it, the object was already very close. He quickly steered the ship away with a sharp turn and just managed to avoid the blue light. Stunned, Guan Yening quickly wanted to check what he had narrowly missed. He was even more shocked when he found out that it was actually a bird. The giant bird was massive enough to blot out the sky and the sun just by extending its wings. As the bird had stopped very close to the ship, Guan Yening was only able to see its head, which was already as huge as a small hill. Frankly, its eye alone was already the size of an elephant. The bird was also looking at him intensely. He could not help but be astonished. What kind of bird could that be? Even without its gigantic beak, the bird could still easily crush the ship just by blinking. Guan Yening wanted to steer the ship away from the potential danger, but he froze in a blind panic. All of a sudden, Di Hao quickly stood up and waved at the bird. Hey, what took you so long? Chapter 27:15. The compensation that Fuyi asked for the bird gave him a wink and started talking in a human voice. Little Di Hao, I did not expect to see you here. Why are you inside this metal cage? It looks so weird. The bird's voice sounded surprisingly melodious. Guan Yening was astonished. His metal ship was not weird at all. In fact, it was the bird that was the weird creature around here. He had never seen a bird this size. Moreover, one that could also talk. Guan Yening tried very hard to see what was behind the bird, but its gigantic size blocked his sight. Di Hao waved at the bird again and said, You may all come in. Guan Yening was beyond shocked. The bird was obviously bigger than his ship. How was it going to fit in? Great! The bird swiftly agreed before Guan Yening even said anything. A blinding light flashed before his eyes, and the bird disappeared entirely. Surprisingly, 6 more visitors showed up in front of the ship. There were 2 women and 4 men, all equally young. They looked and dressed very differently. One of them was wearing a set of long robes that was sky blue. The look in his eyes clearly showed how good he felt about his handsome self. Open the door. Let us in, he said while knocking on the glass. It was the voice of the bird. Guan Yening was dumbstruck. He tried to maintain his composure as he opened the door for them. In another cabin, Fuyi was trying to get a short nap while holding Gu Shijio in his arms. Gu Shijio was quite unsettled, so she was not ready to join him. Nonetheless, Di Fuyi dragged her straight to the bed without listening to her explanations. He even took off her shoes. "Listen to me. Lie down with me for a while." Overwhelmed by the joy of their reunion, Gu Shijio could not find the heart to reject him. Hence, she obliged. Di Fuyi crawled up next to her and gently hugged her in his arms. Ever since he recovered his memory, they had not been able to spend time together. At this very moment, Gu Shijio was completely in his embrace, overwhelmed by the familiar scent that she had been longing for. He was still the same strong and handsome man that she loved. Her heart was thumping fast just being close to him. She could feel how desperate he was for her the moment they kissed. She knew how much he wanted her. Fortunately, the cabin was completely sealed and private. Di Fuyi filled the space with a bed and a mattress that he had prepared himself. Everything he needed for a romantic night was ready, so Gu Shijio assumed that there was no way he would let her escape this time. She tried to examine her own pulse just to be safe. As the product of a union between a god and a goddess, perhaps the baby would be born with supreme qualities that escalated her growth. Gu Shijio felt like she was already 3 months pregnant by now. After the first trimester, it was safe for a pregnant woman to have sex. If she was careful enough, she should be able to satisfy his physical needs. Frankly, she never expected that they would be reunited so soon. Her entire heart was filled with joy. Therefore, there was nothing she would not do to make him happy. She would surely make love to him if he asked her to. To her surprise, all he wanted was to examine her pulse to make sure that she was doing fine. "Let's sleep," he said while planting a soft kiss on her forehead. He then closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Gu Shijio was surprised. She realized she was not sleepy yet, so she turned around and watched him sleep instead. He was sleeping soundly and hardly moved. His curled and long eyelashes immediately caught her attention. She then slowly traced it down to his crimson lips. Surprisingly, there were dark circles around his eyes. She gasped. Chapter 27:16. The compensation that Di Fuyi asked for. 2. When did he last sleep? How did he get so tired? As a great deity, he was equipped with the physique of a supreme being, which should have provided him with enough energy to go sleepless for 10 days. However, from the look of his exhausted face, he must have worked a lot in order to get back to her as soon as possible. She felt so loved by his heartwarming gesture. At the same time, she also felt uneasy about putting her head on his arm for so long. She was worried that his arm might go numb, so she moved her head away slightly. Unsurprisingly, as soon as she lifted her head, his other arm immediately cuddled her and pulled her even closer to him. Gu Shijio looked up and saw that he still had his eyes closed. His steady breathing clearly showed that he was still in a deep sleep. Apparently, his reaction to her lifting her head off his arm was all a reflex action that he had developed over time. Even in his sleep, he did not want her to leave. There was a mixture of emotions in her heart as she was equally touched and saddened by his insecurity. With a sigh, she decided to stay put. However, she tried her best to reduce the pressure on his arms so that he could sleep more comfortably. Gu Shijio was tired too, but the excitement of their reunion kept her awake. She did not want to waste their time together, being asleep. She would rather watch him. Di Fuyi did not sleep for long. He was up in about an hour. Right when he opened his eyes, their eyes were immediately locked with one another. He saw her intense gaze that had never left his face. "Are you awake?" she asked joyfully. "Didn't you sleep?" "I am not sleepy." "So, you have been watching me sleep the whole time?" "Stop bragging. I only started watching you right before you woke up." "Stubborn girl," Di Fuyi teased. He could not help but pinch her cheek and pulled her even tighter into his arms. He could finally heave a long sigh of relief. "Honestly, when did you last sleep?" Gu Shijio turned herself around and laid her body flat on his body. Her gaze was still locked on his eyes. Di Fuyi shifted his body a little and pulled her away. "Try not to lie on your body. The baby might get hurt," he said while putting her down by his side. He had a point. Gu Shijio did as told. "You have not answered my question yet," she insisted. Di Fuyi slowly caressed her hair. For the whole time that you were away. Gu Shijio was speechless. It had been a month since they last saw each other. That explained why he was so tired. Tell me how you got back here, Gu Shijio said while holding his hand that was on her hair. The look in Di Fuyi's eyes darkened. Apparently, what he had been through was not quite pleasant for him to recall. It had been a tough journey. He used Yun Yanli's method and finally escaped from the Shuro world to the upper bound. Tirelessly, he went searching everywhere, but no one had even heard of her. Di Fuyi knew that the first thing that Gu Shijio would do once she was in the upper bound was to find Bai Zhe and her majestic beings. Perhaps she would go and visit Long Sai too. However, it became clear to him that she had not met any of them yet. There were only two possible reasons, the first being that she had not returned to the upper bound at all, or the second, she was severely injured on her way back and resting somewhere. He had to send out every single one of his men to search for her. He even used every spell to trace her scent, only to find that she had not returned to the upper bound at all. She was originally from Starry Crescent Land, so that was the only place that Di Fuyi could think of. However, the pathway between the upper bound and Starry Crescent Land was no longer available. He had to pave his own way to her. He was very worried for her safety, so there was no time to waste. He spent every minute trying to find a way to get to her. He even asked Di Hao for his input, and thought that the boy who came from the future might have some clues, but the boy was just as helpless as him. Chapter 27:17. The compensation that Di Fuyi asked for. 3. The changes in events since Di Hao's arrival would surely have altered the upcoming scheduled events that Di Hao had personally experienced. In fact, Gu Shijio being taken away from the Shuro world came as a surprise to Di Hao. At that point, Di Fuyi knew that he had no one to count on but himself. He spent a lot of time looking around without finding a single clue. But one day he heard Gu Zijia's voice echo in the air. "Fuyi, I miss you." He heard her voice wafting through the breeze. It was a surreal encounter because it felt so real even though Gu Shijio was not around. It was so subtle that he would have missed her voice if he had not paid enough attention. Di Fuyi quickly looked around for her but found nothing. He concluded that it was her inner voice that had called out to him. Once again, Di Fuyi found himself on the rotary platform. There were millions of possible outcomes to different lower bounds, with only one of them being the Starry Crescent Land. He would not simply take a leap of faith, for he was not sure where he would end up. Fortunately, he was able to hear her thoughts. The more she thought about him, the better it would be for him to locate her through array formations. Needless to say, a great amount of spiritual energy was required to create the array formation. It took even more effort to support the formation and keep it open since Di Fuyi was worried that he might have mistaken her location. He decided to keep the portal open until he could hear her voice again and locate her once again. In the end, he spent almost a month at the rotary platform. Even Bai Zhe and Xueyi both felt that what he did was foolish because there was no guarantee that he would hear her voice again. However, right before despair swallowed him whole, her voice came through the air once more. He quickly searched for her and marked down her location. Without wasting any time, he took the boy, who had been by his side all the while, and jumped across the rotary platform together with him. Fortunately, he returned to Starry Crescent Land once more. There was no time for him to catch his breath. He needed a plan so that he could be reunited with his wife as soon as possible. However, when he learned about the current date in the Starry Crescent Land from a stranger, Di Hao took a surprising turn and became concerned about Yen Chen and Little Fox. The following was another series of unexpected events that kept him without any sleep. Fortunately, he was tough enough to go through all the obstacles at once. Di Fuyi only shared about his experiences briefly, but his story was enough to charm Gu Shijio. She was touched by how much he was willing to do for her. She snuggled her head in his arms at that point and looked very pleased. Nonetheless, Di Fuyi squinted his eyes in disapproval at her and said, "It had been such a long time that we were apart, and yet you have only thought about me twice." At one point during his long wait, he was quite convinced that she had lost her memory again and forgotten about him. "Impossible!" She defended herself. "I thought about you every day. I just never showed it." I only heard your inner voice twice, Fuyi teased in a flirtatious manner. Perhaps, you are not that into me after all? Gu Shijio did not see that coming. His last remark rather hurt her as it made it seem that he was unaware of her feelings for him. She was just too busy to announce how much she missed him publicly. She knew that they would not be able to meet anytime soon, so she decided to keep her thoughts to herself. It was only when she was alone and vulnerable that she would express her longing for him. After trying to recall everything, it seemed like she had truly only mentioned his name twice. But to be fair to her, she did not know that he was able to hear her inner voice. Otherwise, she would have done it every day. She explained all this to Fuyi to try to make sure he knew what had really happened. Given this strange connection that the two had, Gu Shijio predicted that if she had thought of him long enough while she was in Tianju Hall, which was where Fuyi used to stay, there was a chance that she could develop some psychic powers that would somehow connect their hearts and minds together. While that idea would certainly be amazing, Fuyi did not intend to let her off the hook so easily. I think I need some compensation from you. How should I compensate you for what had happened? Gu Shijio was willing to offer him anything that he wanted. Think about it yourself. Fuyi then hugged her while waiting for an answer. There he goes, she thought to herself. The man was going to ask for the compensation that he thought he deserved. Chapter 27:18. The compensation that Fuyi asked for, what should she offer to him? With a quick thought, she came up with an idea. I shall return the status of lord to you. Fuyi did not buy the idea at all. Think of something better. Fame and gain were as worthless as manure to him. He never cared about having a title. Then, should I get you a beautiful lady to serve you better? Gu Shijio blinked her eyes in excitement as she teased him. Fuyi could tell that she was teasing him. He raised her chin with his hand and looked at her with a cocky smile. I will not accept anyone besides you, my beautiful lady. Gu Shijio cuddled his arm and openly asked, do you want me? Honestly, Fuyi did not know how to answer her question. He wanted her, but he also needed to consider his child's safety. Therefore, it would be better if he abstained for now. However, he would still need to be compensated in the future for his efforts. Upon deciding what to do, he pulled himself slightly closer to her and said, Little pervert, you need to learn to be more cautious. We still have plenty of time together in the future. There is no need for us to do this now. She thought that he wanted her to satisfy him, so she was willing to do it. But once she heard his explanation, she drew even closer to him and smiled. She finally understood his request and was about to kiss him. Satisfied, Fuyi closed his eyes while waiting for her lips to touch his lips. However, she abruptly stopped moving forward when she was about an inch away from his lips. Things took a swift turn as she lifted her head slightly upward and planted a soft kiss on his eye instead. How about that? Fuyi opened his eyes only to see her flirtatious smile. She obviously did that on purpose. He returned her gesture with a smile and pointed his finger at his lips. Give me something better. Gu Shijio smiled seductively and said, I see. So you want me to kiss you? You should have told me that earlier. How would I know if you never told me? She proceeded to recite a few passages by Banzai Tang to the point where Fuyi could no longer listen to any of it and decided to stop her from talking by occupying her lips with his lips. A long and passionate exchange of kisses left them both breathless. Both of them were sexually aroused and could not wait to get even more passionate with one another. However, they needed to wait for the sake of the baby. The room was so quiet that only their panting could be heard. At that moment, Gu Shijio thought to herself that the sense of tranquility is where all sexual interactions begin. So, in order to suppress their desires, Gu Shijio decided to change the mood. Fuyi, the people of Blue Fox Planet have been ravaging the Starry Crescent land. Many innocent lives were lost. Should we really let them all go? She was not a saint, so there was no way she could tolerate their sins with forgiveness. She was unwilling to let them all go scot-free. Fuyi sighed. Shijio, I did not show my mercy blindly to them. These people should not stay any longer, or else things might change for the worse. Fuyi explained in more detail. the Starry Crescent land used to be immune to all invasions, not because of sheer luck, but because of a natural wizardry barrier that could keep out all invaders. Therefore, the people of the Starry Crescent land could live peacefully. However, there are two conditions to sustain the wizardry barrier. Firstly, it has to be maintained by the Lord. Secondly, no outsiders are allowed to be in Starry Crescent land. About a year ago, there was a huge crack in the wizardry barrier, thus releasing the signals that the Blue Fox family had been trying to transmit to space. In order to fix the crack, we need to either kill them or send them all away. She never knew about that, but some of it did not make any sense to her. That does not sound right. You said that no outsiders are allowed in the Starry Crescent land, but the Blue Fox family is not one of us, right? The Blue Fox family first arrived about 10,000 years ago. During that, the wizardry barrier had not come into existence yet. Moreover, the people from the Blue Fox family had adjusted their physique to be more compatible with the qualities of the land that they had just moved in. Therefore, the wizardry barrier did not keep them out. When was the wizardry barrier first established? Not long after I came into existence. Was it there because of you? It could be. Fuyi only speculated that to be the case with this information. Xueyi realized that she could not possibly punish them here. I still think that we are letting them go far too easily. Silly, do you think that they can all survive? Fuyi laughed. Huh. I bet there are not many of them left now, Fuyi continued. Meanwhile, Xueyi was not able to follow his train of thought. Chapter 27:19. Insecure about losses and gains, before I went after Fan Qianshi, I destroyed the entire wizardry barrier around their base. Then I destroyed all of their battleships. Right after that, I told Mu Feng and the rest of the team that it was time for them to fight back. That was about a day ago. I believe they have conquered the enemy by now. Xueyi heaved a sigh of relief. As usual, the mighty man had everything planned out. Without their battleships, the invaders of the Blue Fox planet were powerless. With that in mind, she could not help but look at Fuyi with admiration. You have never seen the battleships before, have you? How could you destroy the battleships so easily? She thought she was already ahead of the rest, but he was even faster. Fuyi rubbed her hair and replied, "Baby, are you impressed by your husband's capability?" The man was the embodiment of the master of heavenly law. When he recovered all of his memory and power, his level of his kung fu had reached an unfathomable scale. Perhaps, it became instinctive to him how to destroy different objects. Xueyi was certainly relieved. It was great to have him back just in time to swing things back in their favor. Perhaps he could inherit all of the mess in the Starry Crescent land from her so that she could rest. Finally, she began to feel sleepy, knowing that most of their problems had been addressed. Xueyi put her head down onto the pillow and fell asleep right away. Let me sleep for a bit. Please wake me up when we land. Fuyi knew how tired she must be. Sure, he reassured while tucking her under the blanket. A brief exchange outside the quiet room suddenly caught Fuyi's attention. Some guests must have arrived on the ship, so he wanted to check out the situation. However, before he left the room, Xueyi suddenly asked, Mu Feng and the rest of them had no idea that you were resurrected. What was their first reaction when they received your directed audio? They did not believe at first, so I scolded them. They sounded beyond joyful. I'm not sure if they were crying or laughing. None of their utterances made sense to me. Xueyi asked nothing more. She could already picture their reactions vividly in her head. Soon, she fell asleep. Fuyi sat by the bed for a while to examine her pulse before he left the room. It seems that he met some friends. Xueyi, Feng Ruo, and his 4 guardians from the Shura world were all present, including Yun Yanli and the young palace master, Ming Dai. All of them were here. Xueyi's eyes twinkled with delight at the sight of Fuyi. Master, does this thing belong to Starry Crescent land? It seems one of a kind. The thing that he was referring to was the battleship. Instead of answering, Fuyi threw a quick glance at Guan Yening. Intimidated, he trembled a little before he weakly said, This thing belongs to my people. It is not from the Starry Crescent land. Are you the invaders? Xueyi stared at him in disbelief. Guan Yening was too scared to deny it. Yes, he softly admitted. Frustrated, Xueyi almost got physical with the man. How dare you invade the territory of our master? Guan Yening raised his hands to surrender. I know my mistake. I will never repeat it. He took a look at Xueyi's fist that was already charged with power and became worried that he might be killed. The Lord has promised to let us all go, so you'd better not do anything reckless, he quickly added. Did you find Shijio? Yun Yanli finally broke his silence. Of course. She is having a rest in the cabin. Fuyi did not care to lie. Yun Yanli pinched his lips into a tight line. He knew that her safety was no longer his concern. Therefore, he looked away and said nothing more. Multiple tasks kept them all busy for the following days. Chapter 2720. Insecure about losses and gains. 2. When Fuyi and Gu Shijio finally returned to the starry crescent land, their presence set the people's hearts ablaze. As for Guan Yening, he realized that everything had changed the moment he returned. Fuyi did not give him a chance to speak to his people. Guan Yening's men watched helplessly as the powerful man took him away, but they did not know what was happening. Everyone just assumed that he would never be back again. When Fuyi had just left, the people from the Blue Fox planet assessed their situation. Their marshal had left them. Their second-in-command was doomed under Fuyi's reprimand. At the same time, both of the lords of the Starry Crescent Land had returned stronger than ever. These survivors from another planet were powerless to defend themselves. In fact, the odds could not be more against them. Therefore, they decided to run away with the remaining ships that they had. As there were too many of them to cater to, the whole process of fleeing took so long that it provided a perfect window for Mu Feng and his troops to arrive. Only then did they realize that the wizardry barrier that shielded their base had been completely breached. Needless to say, the powerful men of Tianju Hall fought their way right through the door. Although these soldiers of Blue Fox Planet were equipped with the strongest weapons and the most advanced technology, their physical bodies were not able to withstand the spiritual power of their opponents. There was no way they could fight back. The people of Tianju Hall hated these raiders, so they spared no mercy in their attack. After a long battle of blood and fire, the battlefield became a gruesome sight of dead bodies, mostly of the soldiers from the Blue Fox planet. Only a dozen of them ran away in a flurry with their own ship. When Guan Yening arrived, the base was entirely destroyed. Tons of battleships had been badly damaged while bodies of his men were scattered everywhere lifelessly. He only managed to find a dozen lucky survivors in their toughest fort, their spaceship. The rest were dead. Guan Yening could not handle the loss and spat a mouth of blood, but there was already nothing he could do to turn the situation around. He could not even blame Fuyi, as all of this happened before Fuyi made the promise. As a marauder, he always knew that one day he would have to pay for his crimes. Since they had slaughtered the people of the Starry Crescent Land, it was time for them to pay back for what they had done, blood for blood. Guan Yening had nothing to say. The Starry Crescent Land was no longer the place for them. He gathered everyone across the land. About 50 of them had survived. They left the place in shame and disgrace. As for the people of the Blue Fox family, not many outsiders knew about their origin. Only Yan Chen and the lords knew that the Blue Fox family actually brought these raiders in. Fuyi went straight to Lan Yu to figure out the actual involvement of the Blue Fox family in the invasion. Without any hesitation, Lan Yu told him everything that he needed to know. The ancestors of the Blue Fox family had an ancient belief that their family actually came from another world. Still, no one actually took those words seriously as the story was old. Life went on as usual, until the day when the raiders arrived so suddenly at the base of the Blue Fox family. Luckily, Duan Mayan only took the space as a place for him to gather his troops and never drove the Blue Fox family to extinction. However, Duan Mayan did give Lan Yu options. He could either work closely with his soldiers to build a center for their operation or watch as his people perish. In order to protect his people, he chose the first option and lived on with shame. As the king of the Blue Fox family, Lan Yu was placed in captivity in a secluded end of the fort. Like a puppet, his existence was only used to make his people feel secure so that these people could maintain the wizardry barrier that shielded the base. Chapter 27-21. Insecure about losses and gains. 3. The people of the Blue Fox family were even tasked to build houses and manage the farms for the people of the Blue Fox planet. Basically, all the basic chores were their responsibilities. Although they shared the same origin with these raiders, they were not treated well or given any respect. These people from the Blue Fox planet would often make fun of them by calling them mixed blood. At times, they would get beaten or even killed. The Blue Fox family hated these raiders, but there was nothing they could do. Lan Yu tried to get more information from Duan Mayan as to why they came to the Starry Crescent Land and found out that the raiders were only here because of the signals that were transmitted by the statues in the square inside the base of Blue Fox family. The statues had been there for about 10,000 years, and yet Lan Yu knew nothing about the statues' communicating purposes. Perhaps their ancestors made the statues to connect with their people from their faraway homeland so that someday they could return to where they came from. However, Lan Yu was not interested in leaving the place. The Blue Fox family had completely adapted to the conditions of Starry Crescent Land, a place where they called home. They were not ready to leave this place and return to the Blue Fox planet at the far end of the galaxy. Contrary to the information he received, Lan Yu had always thought that the statues were dedicated to their ancestors. If he knew that these statues were actually some communication devices, he would have shattered them a long time ago. Fuyi offered him the choice to leave the Starry Crescent Land in peace, along with the invaders from Blue Fox planet, but he refused the offer without any second thought. He would rather die than leave Starry Crescent Land. In order to move forward, Fuyi asked him to investigate the opinions of his people, so he immediately gathered all of them and offered them the same options. "We will never leave this place. No one here was ever interested in that damn planet." All of them chanted in unison. Hence, there was no need for any additional discussion. In order to prevent any further troubles, Fuyi had to wipe away some parts of their memory, so they no longer remembered their origin from the Blue Fox planet. Only Lan Yu knew the secret, so it served as a painful lesson for him not to repeat the same mistake. Lan Yu was well aware of the severity and extent of his family's secret, so he would never mention a word to the outside world. If the people knew the truth, the whole Blue Fox family would be accused as scapegoats by the angry people of the Starry Crescent Land. They would surely seek revenge for their loved ones who died in the hands of the raiders. Certainly, there were conditions that came with the option of choosing to stay. All of the statues had to be demolished. Moreover, the wizardry barrier was no longer allowed. And, finally, the people of the Blue Fox family were allowed to get married to the common people. Lan Yu agreed to all of the conditions. He was actually fond of a woman, but she was only a mortal from the common world. Due to the restrictions of his family, he was forced to stay within the limits and keep himself away from her. The abolishment of the marriage restriction meant that he was allowed to fight for his love. To repay the Lord for what he had done for the Blue Fox family, Lan Yu offered him an ancient book that was extremely confidential that had been passed down from generation to generation. These books were written in a font that looked like tadpoles, which could be the original language of the Blue Fox planet. However, as years went by, the practice of such language was gradually abandoned in the long course of life, so no one could read the text anymore. With that conclusion, the issues that surrounded the Blue Fox family were solved. After that, Fuyi went to study the weapons that the raiders left behind. He asked everyone to gather all of the weapons they could find so that he could destroy them. Mu Feng and the rest of the team did not quite agree, as they thought that these weapons could be incorporated into their defense system to protect the Starry Crescent Land from any future attacks. They told Fuyi about their thoughts. These things are not from the Starry Crescent Land and will only serve as an obstruction when we rebuild the wizardry barrier that shields the land. Also, these weapons will eventually fall into the hands of different powers, thus creating more fights and reigns of terror, Fuyi patiently explained. Chapter 27-22, Insecure about Losses and Gains. 4. Mu Feng and his men understood the consequences, so they respected Fuyi's decision. Meanwhile, All of the invaders had fled, leaving the starry crescent land in its post-war state. All the citizens took up a role in order to rebuild their homes from scratch. Gu Shijio and Di Fuyi then returned to the former residence of the Lord, the Biwu Palace. The 4 messengers joined them, along with the Muscle and Lu Wu. As for Xueyi and his companions, they were all assigned with different tasks and were sent away. Gu Shijio wanted to take Di Hao along, but the child was suddenly interested in Yun Yanli and was determined to follow the man. Di Fuyi knew that everything that the boy chose to do came with a purpose. He asked no further questions and let the boy go. Yun Yanli could not keep the boy away, so he was forced to take him along. Everything in the Biwu Palace was well maintained. It was as if Di Fuyi had never left. The patterns that he painted on the foldable screens and the wood carvings that he personally created all re-emerged after their long absence. Every little detail was restored. Gu Shijio naturally swept her fingers across the surface of the folding screen to feel its texture. It was her favorite landscape painting. She sighed at the sight of the re-emergence of the painting and said, "Fuyi, when you were immortalized, even the painting went away with you. When I first escaped the Forbidden Land, I was the only one who remembered about you, so I needed proof to tell others about your existence, but there was nothing I could find." The tone of her voice was rather mellow as the ghosts of her past had come back to haunt her once more. Di Fuyi knew how much pain she must have been through all those years, so he took her hand and comforted her. "It is all in the past now. I am here now, and I will never leave again." He took her to the garden for a walk, away from the unpleasant past. They strolled past an artificial hillock, and she stopped walking all of a sudden. Gu Zijia's face turned pale at the sight of the fake mound. "What is the matter?" Di Fuyi did not quite understand. "That is where you were immortalized. I saw the messengers soaked in tears over there," Gu Shijio murmured. Di Fuyi was quite surprised. He, too, remembered the place, so he knew that she was right. However, he did not understand how she knew about it. Shouldn't she have been in the Forbidden Land when the immortalization took place? "I had a dream when I was still in the Forbidden Land that you were immortalized. I was frightened to death and could not even run straight. I kept telling myself that it was only a dream and that you would still be there, waiting for my return. I thought you were still waiting for me to bring you the herbs and save your life." Gu Shijio wanted to chuckle, but she began to choke with tears. Di Fuyi pulled her into his arms and kissed her softly on the lips. "Let's not think about it. Let's forget it all." "How can I not think about it?" Gu Shijio protested. "After everything that has happened, I still cannot find the courage to visit this place. I am scared that your existence is still imaginary. Perhaps everything that happened in the Shuro world was only a dream. Maybe none of it actually happened." She put her arms around his waist and buried her head in his chest. "I am still terrified." Like a child that had been burnt before and dreaded fire, she became very insecure about her losses and gains, which was different from her strong, usual self. Di Fuyi was equally touched and sorrowed by the depths of her love that brought about the insecurities. He pinched her nose and asked, "Can't you feel my presence right now?" Gu Shijio took a long sniff and immersed herself completely in his scent. She knew that she was acting way too insecure. However, her insecurities were not something she could control. Ever since their reunion in the Starry Crescent Land, she had never left his side. She knew that she would panic in his absence. Even when she was sleeping, she had to hold onto his sleeves just to be sure that he was still around. There was one time when she woke up without him. In a flurry, she quickly went around everywhere looking for him. If he had not returned in time, the entire place would definitely have been ransacked. Her melancholic sentiments and insecurities perfectly summed up her current emotions. Gu Shijio knew that it was not her usual self, but she could not help it. She knew that pregnant women would often get emotional and become anxious, so she thought that the fluctuations must be due to her pregnancy. Di Fuyi was a knowledgeable man, but not when it came to his wife's pregnancy issues, so he believed everything she told him. Therefore, he would take her around wherever he went just to make her feel better. He would also avoid going to places that would trigger her flashes of memory about her unhappy past. He thought that the richness of spiritual energy in the Biwu Palace would help to calm her mind. To his dismay, things were quite the opposite. He took her to the room and lay her onto the bed and said, "Sleep. You are tired. You have to stay with me," she insisted while pulling his sleeve. "All right, I will be here at all times," he reassured. He lay down by her side and hugged her. "Sleep. Will you leave?" "Of course not. When you wake up, I will still be here." With the reassurance, Gu Shijio closed her eyes and slowly dozed off. Fuyi observed her and noticed that she was not sleeping very well. Soon, her face seemed to be drenched in sweats. Her hands were reaching out everywhere for him, so Fuyi had to grab her hands in a way that she was familiar with so that she could calm down. The situation had been ongoing for almost a month now. He started to think if it was really normal. Fuyi did not find her overdependence annoying. In fact, he liked that she needed him. It was the change in her character that he found odd. Fuyi regularly examined her pulse. Everything was fine. After a while, he covered her up in the blanket and went outside. "Find me a few midwives who are experienced," he gave an order to Mu Feng, who was there guarding the door. Chapter 27-23. Seek her salve where she gets her sore. Mu Feng was dumbstruck by the sudden request. "Midwives." Fuyi proceeded to place his hand around Mu Feng's shoulder in an authoritative manner. "Any problem?" Mu Feng quickly explained, "Nothing. My lord, why do you need midwives here? They are all mortals, so they cannot enter this place." He had a point. Fuyi then answered, "They do not have to come here. Find me a few midwives so that I can ask them some questions." Mu Feng was really curious but took the order and did as told. It had been a difficult journey for the Lord to return here. Mu Feng still found his Lord's presence a bit surreal and hard to believe, like a dream that would disappear the next day. The 4 messengers agreed to guard the area so that they could keep an eye on the Lord to make sure that he was real. Mu Feng was undoubtedly effective in his search. In 2 hours he managed to find over 20 midwives of different ages and experiences. All of them were gathered in one of the many halls of the Biwu Palace. Fuyi was still in the room with Gu Shijio. He lighted up an incense stick and swirled it around the room so that its fragrant odor could fill the air and make her sleep better. After everything was in place, he left the room and proceeded to the hall to meet his guests. The midwives had never thought that they would be able to meet the Lord one day. When Fuyi showed up, all of them were so dumbstruck in astonishment that they could not even speak properly. Luckily, they had not forgotten about their expertise. They were ready to help in any way that they were needed. However, Fuyi only needed them to answer one question: what are the emotional changes that a pregnant woman might encounter? The midwives were a little nervous at first, as they were unsure of why they were needed here. They were relieved when Fuyi got the ball rolling with a question. They had encountered many pregnant women and dealt with their emotions, mostly daily, so they answered based on their own experience. From the way they explained their encounters, Fuyi realized that each pregnancy was different. Some women experienced no emotional fluctuations, while others became completely different from who they were. The ones that were generally quiet prior to getting pregnant might become suspicious or even hysterical. Some women became depressed and suicidal. There were so many different causes, but they all led back to the same conclusion: it was normal for a pregnant woman to be emotional. Having listened to their stories, Fuyi was finally relieved. It seemed like Zijia's changes were really due to her pregnancy. Being sensitive was one of the symptoms. "What should I do to make my pregnant wife feel better?" he sincerely asked. The midwives looked at each other in consternation. Men would not usually care about their wives' emotions, especially if they were pregnant. In fact, they would be irritated even by the slightest change. In most cases, they would abandon their wife and look for a good time with their concubines. Only a few of them actually cared about their pregnant wife's feelings. It was rare to find a man who was willing to put in the effort to make his pregnant wife feel better. They were especially surprised when the concern was coming from the Lord, who was always known to be mighty and superior. They felt a closer connection to him all of a sudden. He seemed quite down to earth at that moment. The midwives offered him every advice that they could think of. For example, they told him to be present, to talk to her more often, and to do things that she loved to do. Most of the pregnant women would also become picky with food, so they suggested that he prepared her favorite foods for her. As long as she felt loved by her husband, her insecurities would slowly fade. Chapter 27-24. Seek her salve where she gets her sore. 2. Fuyi was enlightened by the useful pieces of advice given to him. When he was satisfied, he asked Mu Feng to pay them some money and let them go. In order to prevent them from spreading the news about Gu Zijia's pregnancy, Fuyi cleared their memory of the events of the day, so they no longer remembered that they had seen the Lord. He managed to get what he needed to know, so there was no more time to lose. He quickly returned to the room as he was worried that Gu Shijio might become distraught with anxiety once she saw that he was not there. The whole process took him only an hour. When he got back into his room, he was relieved to see that Gu Shijio was still sleeping soundly on the bed. He walked out of the room and was surprised to see Mu Feng by the door, standing straight like a wooden pole. Fuyi was slightly baffled. In fact, he never requested any of them to guard the doors in the Biwu Palace. Usually, the 4 messengers would be occupied by their own tasks and paperwork. Their workload was even greater than the president of a country. There should not be any free time for them to do something so pointless, like guarding a door. They would usually show up only when Fuyi asked for their presence. Why did he keep seeing Mu Feng this time? Did Gu Shijio change some rules when she became the Lord? Mu Feng bowed before Fuyi as soon as he walked out of the door. Are you really so free? Fuyi through him glared at him as he asked. Mu Feng blushed crimson with embarrassment. After years of working with Fuyi, he definitely understood what Fuyi meant by that. I am worried, he said after a pause. Mu Feng finally found the courage to tell Fuyi how he felt. Master, actually we all know why Lord Gu is acting this way. Pregnancy may not be the only reason. Tell me more. All of us are the same. We are all insecure. Master, when you called us the other day, we could not have believed it was you if you had not scolded us the way that you always did. Frankly speaking, we were all so happy. Mu Lei was laughing like a madman while rolling on the ground. Mu Yun kept slapping his face to make sure that he had not misheard your voice. Mu Dian first started laughing. Then he started sobbing uncontrollably. I was so happy that I circled the place a few rounds and accidentally walked straight into a pillar. My forehead was left with a big bruise. Everyone else in Tianju Hall thought that we went crazy. He recalled the incident and shook his head. Master, we have all been waiting for your return for far too long. There were long, depressing days, which made the reunion even more exciting and meaningful for us. But the truth is that the long despair has also scarred us with insecurities. To be honest, we still thought that it was only a dream even after you called us and reassured us that you were back for good. It all felt like a dream that would go away eventually. When we saw you walking out of that spaceship, we finally believed that it was true. Master, we still feel insecure. Even though we are here with you and can clearly see that you are doing fine, we are worried that you might disappear again. Among the guardians, we agreed to take turns and guard the doors here. Master, if it is difficult for us, it must be even more difficult for Lord Gu. When you were immortalized, none of us remembered you, but she did. She looked into every corner of the place just to feel your presence again. Chapter 27-25. Seek her salve where she gets her sore. 3. She searched everywhere, from heaven all the way to earth. Whoever she met, whether she knew them or not, she would ask if he or she remembered you. She visited the royal administrative centers and looked into every archive to find a record of you, but no one remembered you. Everything about you had mysteriously disappeared. I still vividly remember the look of utter despair on her face. She looked like she had just been abandoned by the entire world. Fuyi clenched his fists. Gu Shijio had never mentioned anything about these painful encounters to him. Even when she did, she would only brush lightly over the subject. He never knew that it took her so long to forget about him. He could clearly picture her in a frantic search. The despair she must have suffered evoked a sense of pain in his heart as well. Mu Feng continued, none of us understood her. All of us thought that she had gone hysterical, or was perhaps possessed by something evil. We wanted to help her, but she was always busy looking for you. One time, she went out to the sea and returned without any memory of you. However, she did not get any better. She was like a woman without a soul. Nothing could spark joy in her anymore. She was just like a lifeless jade statue. As a lord, her mood was able to affect the weather of the entire continent. So, for a while, the starry crescent land was covered in ice and snow all year round. The people were deprived of their means of survival because of the unnatural chance. Eventually, she found a way to go to the upper bound and stayed there for 6 months. She looked better after that. Master, Lord Gu cares for you way too much. After the painful loss, it is only natural that she becomes so paranoid about losing you again. Master, what she suffers from is the anxiety within her mind. One must seek her salve where she gets her sore. Give her time. Maybe she will become stronger. Fuyi agreed with a nod. When Gu Shijio woke up, Fuyi was quietly reading by her side. The warm rays of sunlight went through the window and brightened up the room with a cozy late afternoon vibe. There were peace and solace all around her. It was always a peaceful time whenever he was around. She was slightly caught in a state of bewilderment when she woke up, which Fuyi noticed. As soon as she opened her eyes, he instantly looked away from his book and said, "Baby, are you awake?" Gu Shijio sat right up and said, "I slept for a little too long. You must have been very tired. I am happy that you could get some sleep." Fuyi then closed his book and asked, "Are you hungry? I can make you whatever you want to eat." Gu Shijio was astonished. "When did you learn to cook?" With a slight pause, Fuyi smiled at her. "There's nothing difficult about cooking. As long as I am willing to do it, what can possibly stop me? This is the time for you to have a completely new appraisal for me. Would you like to try my cooking?" "Yes," Gu Shijio exclaimed. She no longer needed food, but she would love to have some comfort food, especially when she was pregnant. "What do you want to eat?" "Fish." Fuyi nodded. "All right, let's go and get some fish." The glorious red sun descended in the west. Orange tints suffused the blue horizons, creating a picturesque contrast of colors. Baffled, Gu Shijio was sitting on a roll of clouds that Fuyi had cast to transport them away. All she wanted was to eat some fish, but he certainly did not have to go all the way to the sea to get it. Somehow, the place looked somewhat familiar. "Shijio, do you remember this place?" "Yes, the Crystal Palace is right under the water," Gu Shijio answered swiftly. However, her face turned a little pale at the sight of the blue water. The ghosts of her past had come back to hit her again. Naturally, she started pulling his sleeve. Chapter 27-26, Seek Her Salve Where She Gets Her Sore. Fuyi took her hand and dived right in. "Let's go and have a look." Fuyi was at the peak of his kung fu and spiritual power prowess, so diving into the sea was no longer a problem for him. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio stayed within the wizardry barrier that he had created and did not get wet at all. The Crystal Palace still looked the same. It was as majestic and ethereal as ever. Fuyi and Gu Shijio walked into the Crystal Palace, hand in hand. Little stones of amber and jade paved their way in. Soon, they came across a big stone that was carved all over with Fuyi's name. Every stroke of every word was so deeply carved onto the solid surface, which clearly showed how anxious she was when she made those marks. She was desperate to make the words stay. "You made those marks, didn't you?" Fuyi asked. Gu Shijio cleared her throat before responding, "Your names would always disappear right after I carved them. I refused to believe it, so I frantically carved every surface that I could find, but none of them lasted. Now they are here. In fact, they are all over the place." She described it with a calm face, but deep down, a myriad of thoughts filled her heart. Fuyi held her hand and said, "Tell me the details. Share everything with me. I want to know what happened after I was immortalized." Gu Shijio was a little reluctant. Those were the times that she did not want to relive. However, since Fuyi looked serious about his question, she decided to comply and shared her side of the story. She thought that she would be overwhelmed by sadness when she talked about the painful past, but the way he wrapped his arm around her made her feel better. He was trying to prove to her that no matter how bad the past might have been, he was here with her now, in the present. She sighed with emotions when she revisited her old haunts, but she was not as profoundly affected as she thought she would be. His undivided attention made her feel like talking more and more. Slowly, they entered the gardens and saw a phrase that filled the entire place: D and Gio, forever. Some were written neatly. Others were just words scribbled in different sizes and fonts. These carvings filled every surface that one could possibly find. It was easy to picture how desperate she must have been. This unsynchronized mess ruined the view of the gardens for any ordinary passerby, but not to Fuyi. He cherished every little carving that he found along the way. Gu Shijio was noticeably a little embarrassed. I could not make your name stay, but these phrases did, so I kept carving and carving. I woke up the next day feeling defeated by the heavenly law and ended up losing all memory of you. When I first saw these phrases, I thought I was crazy. The master of heavenly law is such a bastard. Fuyi could not help but curse. Gu Shijio wanted to remind him not to scold himself, but she was not allowed to spill the heavenly secret. Quietly, she swallowed her words and acted normally. After the talk, she found herself to be quite relieved. For the first time, she felt as if her sense of melancholy and yearning had fizzled out. Perhaps there was a sense of closure to it all. Fuyi saw the change in her expression and was convinced that she had just defeated the trauma. He believed that the best way to recover from trauma was to face it. The more she tried to suppress her feelings, the more she was going to suffer. Therefore, a good long talk was the key to releasing the deeply distressing experiences that she had been keeping in her heart for too long. Relieved, he sat her down on a chair while he went away to catch some fish. Chapter 27:27. Seek her salve where she gets her sore. 5. His kind gesture touched Gu Shijio, so she decided to roll up her sleeves and join him. Let me do it. The fish that she requested was a very rare find, so it would be best if he did not ruin it with his inexperience. Therefore, both of them worked together and prepared the entire meal that mainly consisted of fish. Nonetheless, Gu Shijio was only a helper. He was still the chef for the night. To Gu Zijia's surprise, the food that Fuyi had prepared was unexpectedly good. Gu Shijio found herself filled with delicacies. After dinner, Fuyi sat down next to her on the chair, and the couple watched the night sky together. Gu Shijio was surprised to notice that the star chart was vastly different from the one that she observed before. Perhaps, a major incident had changed everything that she knew about the stars. In fact, it no longer made any sense to Gu Shijio. Fuyi noticed her bafflement and tried to explain the situation to her. Shijio, the stars that we once saw were the ones that portrayed the fate of the starry crescent land. However, the chart that we are looking at now is the whole picture of every star that is present in the sky. Gu Shijio finally understood why it did not make any sense to her. The chart that she was familiar with was probably solely restricted to the solar system. Perhaps she was now looking at the fate of the entire galaxy. That also explained why she failed to find the star that represented her fate. She took a quick look at Fuyi and wondered what he was thinking of at that time. The place was created entirely by him, so it was only natural that the things that they were looking at now had changed according to his field of vision. If the entire star chart of the universe was displayed right here, could it be that he was already on the verge of recovering his identity as the master of heavenly law? If he did, would he still be the same man that she used to know? Understandably, Gu Shijio was a little preoccupied with her thoughts and did not hear a thing that Fuyi tried to tell her about the stars and their features. Fuyi had to shake his hand in front of her eyes to catch her attention. Baby, time to come back. What were you thinking of this time? Gu Shijio finally recovered from her preoccupation and caught Fuyi looking at her with a spurious smile. Without much thought, she said the first thing came into her head, I did not ask to learn this. You forced me to learn the star chart because you wanted me to take over your role as the Lord before you were immortalized. Why are you teaching me this right now? Are you trying to pass me the heavenly? She realized the mistake and quickly stopped talking. Fuyi seemed puzzled. She could not make up her mind about what she was trying to say, so she looked at him with a long pause. while trying to make up a legitimate excuse. Did you receive any bad messages from the heavenly law this time? Are you trying to pass me your role again? Still slightly puzzled, Fuyi rubbed her hair and said, You are overthinking. I do not have any role to pass on to you. Now that I think of it, I actually have one role. I am now the husband of the Lord. Shall I pass the role to you? He managed to tickle Gu Shijio with the joke. You and your sweet talk. If you have nothing to offer to me, why are you telling me about the star chart? Silly, I am simply sharing the knowledge with you. In fact, this is the first time I am looking at it. At this point, he started to have some doubts. If this was his first time looking at the chart, why did it feel so familiar to him? He was even able to read the star signs without being taught. Between him and Fan Qianshi, he could not decide which one of them was the master of heavenly law. He had always doubted that he could be the master of heavenly law until Fan Qianshi showed up. After all, Fan Qianxi's kung fu was beyond Fuyi's level of understanding. Hence, it made sense for Fan Qianshi to be the master of heavenly law because of his powerful strength and ability to control many things at once. However, he changed his mind a little after he realized that he could read the star chart without any foundation or reason. But, if he was the master of heavenly law, what was Fan Qianxi's role? Chapter 27-28. I trust you. After some small talk, Fuyi was concerned that Gu Shijio might be having a hard time digesting the food while sitting down, so he pulled her up and went for another walk with her. Gu Shijio saw the words that filled another part of the gardens and was quite embarrassed. Fuyi is gone along with everything else, she wrote. Her desperate remarks spoiled the entire view of the gardens. She quietly rolled up her sleeves and performed a spell to wipe away the words along their walk. Deep down, she wanted to restore the place to its original beauty. Wiping away these words also made her feel better. It was like getting rid of her past anxieties and exasperation in one go. Stealthily, Gu Shijio tried to remove the marks without Fuyi knowing. Fuyi had nothing against it. He only held her hand and walked the path together as if nothing was happening. As they continued walking, one of the stones they passed had a carving that said, Ngio, forever. Fuyi immediately stopped her from removing it. Keep this one. It was at that point that Gu Shijio realized that Fuyi knew what she had been up to all this time. She looked up, only to find Fuyi's hand on her forehead. This is a good sign and should never be wiped away. However, you may wipe the phrase about how I was gone like everything else because I will never be away from you ever again. Gu Shijio was delighted by the last promise that he made to her. I take that as a promise. If you abandon me again, I will surely take revenge this time. Oh, baby, why did you make it sound so serious? How do you plan on getting revenge, exactly? Gu Shijio had to pause to think about the master plan but realized that she would never hurt the man she dearly loved. She could not even find the courage to hurt his little finger. However, that did not mean that she could not hurt other people. After a while, she finally came up with a great plan. If you ever leave me again, I will become completely demonized, like a killing machine with no emotions. I will turn the entire world upside down. Fuyi was at a loss for words. He looked at her in astonishment, as he had never thought that she would make such a solemn statement with such serious consequences, which did not sound like her at all. Gu Shijio was shocked by the remark as well. Was there something wrong with her? There were many other ways that she could get her revenge. If they really had to be apart from one another again, there were always ways to help her forget about him. She could even descend to the underworld for a bowl of mengpa soup to forget all of her earthly existence. Therefore, her statement did not make much sense to Fuyi. Gu Shijio herself tried to shake the thought away. I was really worried that you might leave me alone again. I never meant any of those childish things that I just said to threaten you, she explained while gently patting his shoulder as a sign of comfort. Fuyi's heart sank a little. He found out from how that the boy already became an orphan not long after he was born. He did not have a good upbringing. Could what Gu Shijio just said be a prediction of their future tragedy? He took a deep breath and made a promise to himself that such a tragic ending should never happen to them. Then he pulled her into his arms and said, Don't worry, you will never get the chance for your revenge. No matter what happens, I will always be by your side. Gu Shijio planted a soft kiss on his chin. I know. I trust you. The topic was unusually awkward and somewhat ridiculous, so Gu Shijio decided to talk about something else. What do you think about Fan Qianshi? I believe that he will not give up so easily. Someday, he will come back to us again. Of course, after spending so much effort on the plot, he surely will not let this go. If I am not mistaken, Long Fan must be one of his embodiments back in the day. Perhaps even the character of Zhu Duqing. He must have been the one behind the invasion from the people from the Blue Fox planet as well. How do you know? Fuyi showed her a book in his hand. The book has a record of some of the history of the great celestial master. He and his men first discovered the starry crescent land. He was also the one who made the rules and regulations for the Blue Fox family. He died of old age, eventually, and was buried. I sent someone to check the coffin, but it was empty. The members of the Blue Fox family are born with a unique characteristic that allows their skeletons to stay intact for more than 10,000 years. Chapter 27-29. I trust you, too, Gu Shijio added. Do you mean to say that the plot began as early as 10,000 years ago? And that Fan Qianshi planted the Blue Fox family here all because of you? It seems like it. Fuyi nodded. There is something that bothers me, he continued while gently tapping on the table. Gu Shijio looked at him in bewilderment as she waited for him to continue. From what I have observed, Fan Qianshi's spiritual power and kung fu are both stronger and more powerful than mine. It should be very easy for him to take my life or even tear my soul into pieces. Many options are far easier than this incredibly long plot, he explained. Also, he refused to fight me face to face and would rather run away as soon as he realized that his plan had failed. He did not even try to fight me. Don't you think that is a bit odd? It sounds odd, Gu Shijio agreed. Perhaps he is intimidated by your identity. Maybe he will be punished somehow if he were to harm you directly. Fuyi shook his head. We fought before. No amount of catastrophic punishment is enough to make him repay for what he has done to me. He certainly is not worried about the punishment. What else could it be then? Perhaps I have a greater and more powerful identity, which happens to be intimidating to him. Maybe there is no way that he can kill me. Perhaps my death will restore my powerful identity once more, which will be his bigger threat. He must be afraid that I will take my revenge once I am back to where I belong, so he has to stay in the dark and play dirty so that I never find out who he really is. I believe that he is trying to find a way to destroy me for good, so I will not become who I really am. Gu Shijio remained quiet. She could not agree more with Fuyi's theory, but she could not say anything. Gu Shijio recalled her dream. Everything seemed blurry, but the Master of Heavenly Law and the man in black clearly made an impression on her. Could Fan Qianshi be the man in black? And was it possible that the Master of Heavenly Law would once again become powerful once his life came to an end? Death would never truly occur to him. Once he became who he really was, Fan Qianshi would never be able to defeat him. Therefore, Fan Qianshi chose to conceal his true identity and would only disguise himself with other forms to help him blend in with Fuyi's surroundings. This was to keep him safe in the event that Fuyi remembered who he really was in the past. As for Fuyi's weakness, Fan Qianshi must be looking for something beyond the physical. Otherwise, he would have found it a long time ago. Gu Shijio suddenly remembered about the video that Fan Qianshi showed her. She figured that some parts of the video must still be true. For example, the Master of Heavenly Law used to be a man who had no emotions and no regard for anyone by staying aloof from all worldly matters. Only without emotions could one be truly strong. He needed to be fair and square without any biases before he could secure his position as the Master of Heavenly Law. Since he could be so objective, his existence was too powerful and intimidating. There was nothing that could truly become his weakness. As the creator of the universe, Fan Qianshi had to create something to become Fuyi's weak spot, so he could regain his power. Could Gu Shijio be the weak spot that Fan Qianshi had purposely created for Fuyi? Gu Shijio shivered a little at the thought of the possibility. The master of heavenly law was not allowed to fall in love with someone else, or he would have to surrender his power. If the video was true, then Fan Qianshi had already achieved his aim. However, something did not quite make sense. Di Fuyi had been in love with her since quite a long time ago. Why did Fan Qianshi even bother to take the role of Zhu Duqing and create more feuds? He only needed to wait patiently until Di Fuyi finally surrendered his power to him. There was no need to do so many unnecessary things like getting little Fox pregnant with a demon. Chapter 2730, I Trust You, 3. In order to make Di Fuyi surrender his power, perhaps there was a lot more that needed to be done. It surely was not as simple as creating a trap for him to fall in love. Gu Shijio could not help but look at Di Fuyi confusedly. Her heart was filled with a myriad of feelings. The man was the master of heavenly law. No one would have known that the man would eventually fall for someone like her. Yet, he loved her so much that he was willing to compromise on so many of his principles. Why are you looking at me like that? Di Fuyi noticed her odd gaze. He gently tapped on her head and asked, Are you so obsessed with me? He looked at her pridefully, for he was proud of his qualities as her perfect partner. Gu Shijio made a sibilant sound as a sign of disapproval. Don't you feel embarrassed? You are feeling way too good about yourself. Di Fuyi laughed out loud and replied, I truly am a good man. Why should I underestimate my own qualities? You said that you might have a more powerful identity. With power comes responsibility. What if you are not allowed to fall in love with anyone at all? Gu Shijio asked casually. I do not care a thing about fame or status, Di Fuyi answered casually. If there really is a conflict between power and love, I will give up the power. No matter what happens, I will never let you go. It is hard to say. In the video that Fan Qianshi played for me, you were portrayed as a despicable man. You chose to kill me in order to secure your power. She uttered and then stopped talking, all of a sudden. She realized that she might have spilled a heavenly secret, so she waited for a while to see if there was any catastrophic punishment, but there was none. Di Fuyi seemed interested. What video did he play for you? Was it about us? It was about all three of us, but I can tell that the scenes were mostly made up. There were too many loopholes that did not make any sense. I do not believe in any of those theories. Di Fuyi paused for a moment to think. May I have a look at the video? The video was played by using a piece of secret equipment on board the spaceship. I only remember the content, so there is no way I can play it again for you. I can tell you more about it if you want. Di Fuyi shook his head in disapproval. The video could be important. You might have missed out on some points. He gazed at her in contemplation. If you do not mind, may I read your mind to look into your memory about the video? Do you know how to read one's mind? Yes. All right, go ahead then. Gu Shijio agreed without hesitation. After a while, Di Fuyi finally let go of his hands from her forehead. His silence was a clear indication of how shocked he was after seeing what the video was about. He needed some time to process everything and make things clear. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio was starting to get tired. She had been feeling quite exhausted for the whole past month. Therefore, she decided to close her eyes for a short nap. She would talk to Di Fuyi later when she was more rested. To her surprise, the short nap turned out to be a long, deep sleep. When she woke up, it was already the next day. She found herself in a bedroom at the Biwu Palace, instead of the lazy chair in the garden. Needless to say, Di Fuyi must be the one who had brought her back. Di Fuyi was lying close by her side. He was looking at her intensely the moment she opened her eyes. What do you think about the video? Gu Shijio was not embarrassed to stare back at him. The video is helpful to me. With a smile, Di Fuyi took the video as a possible answer to many of his questions. Are you saying that the video is based on true events? Gu Shijio was puzzled. After much thought, I realized that a few things could be true. Gu Shijio was ready to listen with all her ears. First of all, our identities should be true. I am the master of heavenly law, while he is one of the creators of the universe. Secondly, he refuses to accept that I am the master of heavenly law, so he tried to get his hands on this power. Thirdly, as the master of heavenly law bears no weakness or biases, he has to create a disturbance, which is why you were created in the first place. The rest is just nonsense. I am not such an evil man. His theory made so much sense. Gu Shijio was relieved, but not entirely at ease. If you agree that he is the creator of the universe, do you also agree that you and I were both created by him? Fuyi expressed his disapproval. Although I remember nothing about my origin, my instincts clearly indicate that it is untrue. You, too, are not necessarily created by him. This video reminds me of the ancient story about how Pangu created the world for mankind and how Nuwa Empress made human figurines out of clay. Also, there was Fuyi who created the laws to govern us. All three of them were the ancient gods. They were the ones who created the 6 worlds that made life possible. All of them were equally important, only with different tasks in nature. If I am not mistaken, Fan Qianshi was only pretending to play the role of Pangu by creating order in a messed-up world. He was not meant to control the heavenly law or to alter any regulations that were reinforced by the heavenly law. The heavenly law is just like Fuyi, one of the creators of the universe. Gu Shijio was astonished. So, am I the legendary Nuwa Empress? Chapter 2731. She loved what he just said. Gu Shijio started to doubt herself. It does not sound right. Nuwa Empress knew how to make human figurines out of clay. She was the very ancestor of all mankind. I know nothing of that sort. In fact, Fan Qianshi is the one who knows how to make humans. The clones that he made are just examples. Fuyi gently rubbed her temples and said, "Silly, that was only a metaphor. I was only describing the relationship between Fan Qianshi and I. I am not Fuyi, and he is not Pangu. As for Nuwa Empress, there is no sign of any connection between you and her. She only exists in folk tales." Gu Shijio fell back onto the bed. That is disappointing. I thought I could be more powerful and noble. Fuyi lay down by her side and pulled her into his arms. Just be yourself. There is only one of you. No one can ever replace you. Why should you care about having a different identity? She loved what he just said. Her broad smile clearly showed how happy she was at that remark. Actually, I only want to be your perfect match. But there is no denying that I wish I could be as mighty as Nuwa Empress. Delightfully, Fuyi answered, I don't like Nuwa, I only like Gu Shijio. His words melted her heart. Gu Shijio buried her head in his chest. Yes, I am your one and only, so are you to me. Regardless of your identity, the one thing I want for us is to be together forever. He could feel her warm breaths on his skin and her soft body in his arms. Aroused, his blood started boiling in excitement. They had not had sex ever since they were reunited. Each night, he had to suppress his sexual desires every time he held her in his arms. Their sweet exchange was also a cause of physical and mental suffering to him. He wanted to make love to her so badly. Nonetheless, she had just passed her first trimester, so it should be safe for them to have sex. He continued to gaze at her intensely. Playfully, his fingers slowly circled her waist tie, still deciding whether he should pull her robes open. Shijio, is it time? Gu Shijio looked up and caught the burning look in his eye. She could tell that he was aroused just from one look. She stammered a little. Her cheeks were already flushing crimson. Fuyi waited for a while, but she still had not answered his request. He thought that she was reluctant and was slightly disappointed to learn that. It is all right. I can wait until the baby is finally here, he replied with a smile. With that in mind, he did not want to be on the bed anymore. He decided to go outside for a stroll and calm himself down in isolation. To his surprise, Gu Shijio suddenly wrapped her arms tightly around his waist. Fuyi suddenly became motionless. He could feel her heat even through a layer of clothes. She said with involuntary pauses, Actually, there is no need to wait. I have to be careful. Fuyi's eyes glistened with excitement. He turned around and pulled her body into his embrace. Needless to say, both of them started panting in excitement. He kissed her lips softly and whispered, I will be careful. They both felt a strong longing for each other. Finally, they were able to be free and express their love for one another. They started to get undressed, with all of the clothes sent across the air and folded tidily on the rack next to the bed. Behind the thin curtains, the man and the woman had been stripped naked. Intertwined, the couple was drenched in ecstasy, for making love was an instrument of romantic expression for their passionate love. Gu Shijio fell asleep. This time she was happy. She seemed relaxed and pleased. Fuyi sat against the wall. Troubled, he had a hard time sleeping, so he sat and watched her sleep for a tremendously long time. Their lovemaking was not easy. The entire time he had to be soft and careful to avoid hurting the baby in her tummy. Hence, he was not fully satisfied. Chapter 2732. A nightmare at least, he got to spend the night with her, and for that he was happy. Apart from that, he was still a little puzzled. At some point during their sweet exchange, Gu Zijia's eyes flashed a tint of red light when she was at the climax of her sexual excitement. It was only for a second, so if Fuyi had not looked her in the eye at the moment it happened, he would not even have realized it. What puzzled him even more was the mysterious source of dark and evil aura that was hidden in the depths of her body. He could feel something while he was inside her body. At first, he thought it was only a mistake, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt uneasy. He examined her body over and over, but nothing was found. He put his fingers down by her wrist to feel her pulse. Everything was perfectly normal. He could not help but think if he was oversensitive. Still worried, he waited until she was sleeping soundly before he used his spiritual power to trace every inch of her veins to make sure that she was fine. Gu Shijio woke up from a dreadful nightmare. She had been strolling through a blanket of dense pink mist. From a distance, a child could be heard crying. She followed the voice and found a baby girl in the corner. The baby was only a few months old, looking very sweet and adorable. Her chubby hands and chubby thighs curled up in rolls of fat. The girl was still crying, making Gu Zijia's heart sink. She could not resist the instinctive urge to hold the baby. Before she managed to touch her skin, she was surprised to find out that there was a trace of dark energy surrounding the baby girl's body. Shocked, she stopped to observe the strange encounter. The dark energy around her body strangled the baby, so it was difficult for her to breathe. The unexplained occurrence baffled her. She decided to perform a spell to dismiss the dark force and free the baby, but while she was waiting for the spell to activate, the dark source of energy suddenly came alive and turned into the form of a snake. Frighteningly quickly, the snake went into the baby's body and disappeared before her eyes. Gu Shijio did not see that coming. She scooped the baby up, so she could have a good look at her. Slowly, the baby opened her eyes and said something with difficulty, "Mother, help me." Certainly, she was caught off guard. A bloodshot tint of red replaced her dark eyes. Even her lips turned entirely red too. "Hey, Mother," she smilingly said, but in a very different tone from before. The baby's wicked smile terrified Gu Shijio. For a moment, she thought she was holding an evil being in her arms. Utterly shocked, she screamed out loud and abruptly woke up from the nightmare and realized that she was still in her bedroom with no sign of any baby girl. Her heart still thumped with fright, and her entire body was drenched in sweat. "What is it? Did you have a nightmare?" Fuyi gently rubbed her forehead. With a sigh, Gu Shijio nodded. "What was the dream about?" Gu Shijio paused for a second. In an instant, she had forgotten what the dream was all about. She could roughly recall seeing a beautiful child who referred to her as mother. There was only one child who would call her so. She immediately assumed the dream was about Xueyi. "I think the dream was about Xueyi." "What about him?" "I barely remember what happened. I only know it was a nightmare." She suddenly became nervous. "By the way, we have not heard from him in a while. Has something bad happened to Xueyi?" Chapter 2733. I am just a little bored. Quickly, Gu Shijio retrieved her directed audio spell to get in touch with Dihao. It did not take long before he picked up the call. "Mother, are you missing me?" Gu Shijio was slightly relieved. The boy sounded lively, so he should be fine. However, the background noise from the other end of the call startled her. She could hear the sound of wind whistling and people fighting. There was even a long, doleful cry uttered by some animal. Di Hao was obviously in the middle of a fight. Had he been attacked? Where did Yun Yanli go? Gu Shijio had so many questions for Di Hao but was interrupted. Mother, are you doing fine? Where is father? If Di Hao had the time for much chit-chat, he must be doing fine. Moreover, Yun Yanli was there with him. Yun Yanli made a promise that he would keep the boy safe. No being in the Starry Crescent Land was strong enough to threaten Yun Yanli. Therefore, under his care, Di Hao would not be at risk at all. Even if there was a danger, all Di Hao had to do was to stand and watch. Your father is here. Where are you? Who are you fighting with? There is nothing to worry about, mother. I am just a little bored. Right now, I am messing around with a flood dragon. It was only a flood dragon. Yun Yanli, and even Di Hao, could easily defeat a flood dragon. No matter how powerful the dragon was, it was surely not enough to fight them. She enjoined her son to be obedient, and Di Hao acknowledged her concerns with a few chuckles. While they were still chatting, Yun Yanli's abrupt voice could be heard screaming from behind. Di Hao, are you trying to kill yourself? Get down from it now. Yun Yanli's instructions alarmed her. She could tell that he was raising his voice from at least 100 meters away from Di Hao. Mother, let's continue next time. There is no need for you to worry about me. I am doing just fine. Di Hao ended the call abruptly. That left Gu Shijio baffled. Yun Yanli was slightly depressed, but he rarely lost his composure. He was definitely a refined gentleman. Therefore, Di Hao must have done something terrible. Yun Yanli was utterly annoyed. When Di Hao spoke to his mother, he was sitting on top of a snowy white flood dragon. He hung himself around its horns and was being flung around like a mini windmill. The flood dragon was no ordinary one. It was about to become a nightmare for them. Normally, a flood dragon's spiritual power would be around level 10, thus making its existence somewhat spectacular in the land of mortals. No one dared to approach them. However, Yun Yanli could still easily defeat them all, even if 10 flood dragons chose to attack him at once. Hence, when Di Hao told Yun Yanli to hunt down a flood dragon in exchange for his freedom, he did not hesitate to agree. Never had he expected that the flood dragon that Di Hao found was the king of the herd. Furthermore, it was about to reach its next stage of evolution into a real dragon. There were strict conditions to decide whether a flood dragon could be transformed into a real dragon. Sometimes, the probability was less than 1 in a million. However, if a flood dragon was able to meet all the conditions, it definitely had eminent qualities that were unparalleled with the rest of its kind. The snowy white flood dragon in front of them was the best of its kind. It had been cultivating for more than 10,000 years now, which made it more ancient than any of the other beings in the Starry Crescent Land. It barely showed itself in public and had been hiding and cultivating in isolation near a mountain covered in snow. Its trails were so perfectly hidden that no one ever noticed its existence, not even Fuyi. Today was finally the day it could become a real dragon. It could achieve its lifelong dream. It was lying in a pool of clear water while trying to absorb the essence of the moon through a rift. Meanwhile, it had to spit out its internal pill so that dragon scales could slowly form around its body. The physical transformation was a difficult journey, but it was all worth it. When the final piece of its scale was transformed, it could finally become a mighty dragon. Unfortunately, 3 invaders interrupted it when it was 2/3 done. Not wanting to get distracted, it set off a tremendous pressure in the air in an attempt to sweep the 3 invaders away. To its surprise, only the lady was affected. Furthermore, the little boy took away the dragon pearl that was hanging loosely by its mouth. Chapter 2734. Half of its heart, a dragon's pearl, was the ultimate source of life for any kind of dragon. Given that a little kid had stolen it, the great white dragon quickly got into a towering rage. In a fit of violent anger, it took off in an attempt to recapture its stolen treasure. Di Hao started running once he stole the pearl. What surprised Yun Yanli was that the silly boy was actually running away from Yun Yanli instead of towards him for help. Fortunately, his short legs were no obstacle to him. He was running incredibly fast, as though he had a pair of Hot Wheels on his feet. The great white dragon howled its displeasure while engaging Di Hao in a close pursuit. In Yun Yanli's field of vision, the two were drifting farther and farther away. Yun Yanli had no words for the boy's mischief, but he decided to follow them. When he finally saw them again, the boy was hanging on the great white dragon's horns. The great white dragon stood high into the sky, about 100 meters tall. It was shaking its head as vigorously as it could, swinging Di Hao's little body in the air like a flag. The boy and the dragon were in the middle of a massive fight, and there was a chance that Di Hao might be swallowed alive by the great white dragon at any time. Yun Yanli began to get really worried about the naughty little boy. He called out to him before leaping into the air to get the boy down. He did not take long to reach the boy, but Di Hao reacted quickly enough to kick his hand away from grabbing him. "I want to conquer it." Yun Yanli was at a loss for words. He could not believe what the boy just said. In order to conquer a creature, one must defeat it and convince the creature to surrender wholeheartedly to the person whom it would now refer to as its master. Dragons were known to be proud of their impeccable pedigree. These creatures would not surrender easily. In fact, they would probably choose to accept death rather than submit. The flood dragon was almost evolving, so it must think very highly of itself. Moreover, its pearl was taken away at a crucial time, possibly rendering its previous efforts fruitless. Hence, the likely outcome of the fight was that Di Hao could possibly be torn into shreds. So why would the flood dragon even surrender itself to the boy? It was highly unlikely. Under the current circumstances, Yun Yanli was convinced that none of them was able to leave this place alive. The flood dragon was, apparently, able to understand their conversations. It howled a loud cry of amusement. "I will never be conquered," it thought to itself. It would never allow its mighty self to be conquered by a despicable human that inconvenienced it. Then, the flood dragon spiraled into the sky, gathering speed as though it was becoming a streak of lightning. It started summoning the winds and the rain. Droplets in the air slowly transformed into sharp weapons, which were all simultaneously aimed at little Di Hao. Yun Yanli followed them and saw everything that was happening in the sky. He watched as the rain droplets turned into sharp crystals, billowing and snapping in the wind like a swirling vortex. It was an attack on a catastrophic scale where the crystals were coming straight at Di Hao from every angle. Obviously, the flood dragon had just launched its deadliest move. Even Yun Yanli would struggle to defend himself from the sharp crystals. What more for Di Hao was only a boy. On days involving long journeys, the boy would even request to be carried instead of walking on his own. He was so fragile that even stepping on a rock would bother him for the whole day. Once hit, the boy would end up becoming a hedgehog with sharp crystals. Without hesitation, Yun Yanli sent himself across the air and covered the boy with his body. At the same time, he also released a protective wizardry barrier to shield them away from the crystals. These crystals of tremendous force landed on his wizardry barrier like a storm, though most were bounced off. However, there were still many crystals in the sky. Chapter 2735. Half of its heart, too. Crystals were abundant in the sky, dropping toward them like a rainstorm of deadly needles. In just a few seconds, more and more needles started to get caught on the surface of the wizardry barrier, slowly causing the barrier to break. And, in the end, some needles were able to penetrate through and cut right into Yun Yanli's flesh. Yun Yanli's body trembled slightly as he snorted in pain. Blood slowly traced down his back and dripped onto the dragon pearl in Di Hao's hand. His blood then continued to stain the great white dragon's scales. The great white dragon was ready to swing them away from its head. However, the sudden smell of Yun Yanli's blood diverted its attention. "Master!" Mingdai could be heard calling out loud to Yun Yanli from afar when she saw him bleeding. Desperately, she came straight to him. Roar! The great white dragon uttered another long howl before sweeping her away in a blinding flash of blue light, thus sending her across the air like a shooting star. Shocked, Yun Yanli wanted to leave and find her but was stopped by Di Hao. Don't go. Yun Yanli hesitated a little. While he still had a hard time deciding whether to stay or go, the dragon's long howl instantly distracted him. There were some pauses in between like it was trying to talk. Yun Yanli was never able to understand the language of the animals. But this time, he could magically understand the flood dragon. What is your relationship with the Emperor Immortal, Yun Lang? He was my father, Yun Yanli honestly answered, though still dumbstruck. Yun Yanli's reply startled the great white dragon. After a pause, it took a turn in the air and headed to the ground. Come on down. I will fulfill a wish of yours. It stopped by the hill, where they could finally stand and talk. The sudden plot twist caught Yun Yanli in astonishment. On the contrary, Di Hao was not quite as surprised. He tugged on Yun Yanli's sleeves and said, "Come on, let's get down from here." After a while, Yun Yanli found himself sitting by the rock, caught with a myriad of thoughts. His father had once saved the great white dragon's life. So, in order to repay its debt to the man, the great white dragon made a promise to Yun Lang that one day, it would grant a wish to him or his children and fulfill anything that was asked. The only way for the great white dragon to recognize him or his children was to stain the pearl with blood. However, as an emperor immortal, Yun Lang never truly cared about the promise of a flood dragon, so he never mentioned anything about the promise or the flood dragon to Yun Yanli. The flood dragon valued loyalty very much. It had not forgotten about the promise that it made almost thousands of years ago. Yun Yanli was so surprised that he could not speak. Ask for half of its heart. Quick, ask for half of its heart. Yun Yanli could not deal with the cruelty. Taking away half of the flood dragon's heart would kill it. Meanwhile, the flood dragon had obviously heard Di Hao's request but said nothing. It was patiently waiting for an answer from Yun Yanli. Could you give me half of your heart? Yun Yanli awkwardly asked. Is this your only request? Yes, Yun Yanli firmly said. The great white dragon first looked at little Di Hao in bafflement, and then to Yun Yanli. Ask the boy why he needs my heart. To save a life, Di Hao answered before Yun Yanli even translated the flood dragon's message for him. He obviously understood the flood dragon too. Puzzled, the great white dragon asked, "It is nothing strange for this man, the son of my savior, to understand my language. His late father and I once made a blood agreement. When his blood is dripped on my pearl, we can communicate with one another. As for you, how did you manage to understand me?" "Because I am a genius," Di Hao answered frankly. Chapter 2736, Half of its Heart, 3. The great white dragon was dumbstruck and decided not to linger on its earlier question. Whose life do you intend to save? The heavenly secret cannot be shared. Di Hao refused to tell. Di Hao gazed at the creature intently and reassured, "You should know that the heart is very important to me and the world. I am sure that it will not be wasted." He continued to play around with the dragon pearl on his hand. "You will not die even if half of your heart is taken. What you need is to use this pearl to recreate the other half slowly. In 10,000 years, your heart will once again become a whole." The great white dragon looked at him in disbelief. "I cannot believe that you are so well informed about these facts. Who are you exactly?" "Di Hao," he answered delightfully. "I have never heard of such a name. You have now. It is time for you to do what you have promised. Remember, I need the left half of your heart." The great white dragon hesitated a little. It was still unwilling to submit half of its heart so abruptly. It was finally the day that it could finally become a real dragon. Once its heart was taken, it would need at least another 10,000 years to reach the same milestone again. However, the promise must be honored. Even if it was unwilling to, it had no choice. The great white dragon still kept its promise, though it was not entirely ready. It had to endure the pain and slashed its chest open to take out its heart. With its sharp claw, it separated its heart chamber into two halves and submitted the left half to Di Hao. All of its scales were trembling due to the pain. Di Hao accepted the heart and at the same time, returned the pearl to the great white dragon. He also offered it a bottle of medicine. This medicine will help your heart to recover faster. In 5,000 years, your heart will become whole again. The great white dragon headed straight into the snowy mountains to meditate and rehabilitate. It was then that Yun Yanli saw how messy the whole place had turned out to be. He then looked at Di Hao with a sudden realization. I finally know why you insisted on following me around. Your company has not been entirely pleasant, but I know now that you are only doing this all because you really needed the other half of the flood dragon's heart. Yes, Di Hao answered him honestly. How did you know that the connection between the flood dragon and I? Di Hao looked away and softly said, the heavenly secret must not be told. Yun Yanli was not quite pleased. At first, he did not want to agree to Di Hao's overbearing request. He never wanted the child to be around, but one directed audio changed his mind. The child promised to share more about Zhu Duqing to prepare Yun Yanli for his revenge. Without any forethought, Yun Yanli agreed. He thought that taking a child with him should not be much of a problem, even though he could tell that Gu Shijiao was not entirely at ease to see her child go. Acting on impulse, he made a promise to Gu Shijiao that he would protect Di Hao at all costs until the child was returned to her once more. Never had he imagined the kind of trouble he would have to go through. The child was too naughty. Many a time, Yun Yanli wanted to send the boy back to his mother. However, the boy would cry whenever Yun Yanli threatened to send him away. It was unusual to see a beautiful baby crying with great distress. Every passerby would automatically judge Yun Yanli. As for Mingdai, it looked as though she was the one instructing him to be cruel to his son from a different wife. It was a frustrating experience, to say the least. Mingdai was never fond of the little intruder who disrupted her personal time with Yun Yanli, so she was never friendly to Di Hao. The way she looked at him was even violent at times. However, she knew that she was not allowed to hurt Di Hao, or else Yun Yanli would be in great trouble. She had to suppress her urge to stab the boy in the back, even though she hated him to a great extent. Chapter 2737. Whose life are you trying to save? She did not utter a word to Di Hao for the entire time that they traveled together. The little one was acting weird as well. He only cared about Yun Yanli and never gave Mingdai any attention. When Yun Yanli had to be away for some errands, he would ask Mingdai to take care of Di Hao for a while, but Di Hao was never keen on it. The way he looked at Mingdai was always unfriendly. Sometimes even with a feeling of revulsion. All in all, Di Hao and Mingdai were deemed to be incompatible in many ways. Yun Yanli was quite troubled by the tension, but he was at least happy to know that the boy relied on him. The little one is Zijia's child, so he thought it would be good if they could be close. In fact, he was glad to be needed and to have her child around. Little did he know that the child had a hidden agenda. Still puzzled, Yun Yanli looked at Di Hao sternly. Why did you have to make such a big plot involving me? If you really needed the other half of the flood dragon's heart, you could have brought your father here. He would have done the same thing with ease. Why did the boy insist on playing the fool and following Yun Yanli around? Di Hao explained, the flood dragon has been cultivating for more than 10,000 years and has never hurt a single soul. From the way it cultivates, it will one day become a celestial being. It has to submit its heart of its own free will. We are not supposed to kill it or threaten it, or else the heart will lose its effect. Yun Yanli was surprised. What do you need half of its heart for? Its heart can be used to purify even the darkest form of evil energy. You said that you needed it to save a life. Whose life are you trying to save? Di Hao took a deep breath before answering, a very close relative of mine. There was no reason to lie to Yun Yanli, for he had helped to retrieve the heart. A close relative? Who is it? Yun Yanli was baffled. Di Hao only smiled at him. It was yet another heavenly secret. With a sneer, Yun Yanli said nothing more and was ready to leave. From the way Di Hao fought with the flood dragon, the boy's kung fu was already so advanced that he would be just fine going on his own. Therefore, Yun Yanli found himself feeling a little foolish to think that the naughty boy actually needed his care and protection. Now that the boy already had what he wanted, Yun Yanli would not be of any good to him anymore. However, Di Hao seemed to be still following him. Where are you going? Yun Yanli did not even turn around to answer him. With a sigh, Di Hao knew how much he had offended Yun Yanli. He decided to tell Yun Yanli from far behind, "Stay away from Ming Dai. She is not the one for you. You are going to endure plenty of suffering if you stick with her." With a hiss, he disdained the boy's warning, for he knew how incompatible they were. Ming Dai was his most loyal companion with a heart of complete dedication. Now that she was swept far away by the flood dragon, he felt obliged to find her. Di Hao watched as Yun Yanli disappeared from his sight. He shook his head in disapproval, for he realized how soft-hearted Yun Yanli was for the woman. He would never be able to kill her, even though she would eventually become the greatest obstacle in his life. Di Hao started thinking if he should help Yun Yanli as a favor for what the man had done for him. He felt the need to kill the woman. When Di Hao found Ming Dai, she was unconscious. She had been sent flying through the air with such great force that she managed to bring down 2 trees with her before finally stopped at a big rock. Her celestial physique managed to keep her alive even though she was fatally injured. Her breathing was very weak, like a candle flickering in the wind. Di Hao looked at her for a while. Slowly, he raised his hand that was already loaded with a 7-colored ray. He never liked killing a woman, especially one who was already fatally injured. It would hurt his dignity, but he needed to help Yun Yanli. Chapter 2738. I will heal your wound. The 7-colored ray transformed into its brightest form. Apparently, Di Hao was ready to strike at any time. Ming Dai, on the other hand, was already dying. Once hit by the ray, she would be immediately killed. Bang! A streak of lightning emerged abruptly and collided with the 7-colored ray in Di Hao's hand. The violent bombardment of 2 immense powers managed to startle the entire area, sending tremors across the grounds as a result of the powerful collision. Ming Dai rolled a few rounds on the ground as a result of the impact. She started bleeding from her nose and her mouth while her breathing became even more unstable. Understandably, Di Hao was pushed away by the impact as well, and the blood in his body started boiling. He was a little pale and needed a moment to catch his breath. The force that stopped him was a celestial lightning bolt. In the sky, black clouds gathered overhead. It was an unmistakable ominous sign of more lightning to come. He knew that the first streak of lightning that hit him was only meant to caution him. If he insisted on killing the woman, he would be struck for real. Nevertheless, he refused to heed the warning and carried on with his mission to kill. Di Hao, what are you trying to do? A voice could be heard calling out loud from afar. In an instant, Yun Yanli emerged from the sky and stood himself between them. Yun Yanli's predestined fate seemed like an inexorable doom to the man. Di Hao finally gave in and changed his mind. He looked up and said in a discreet manner, "Yun Yanli, Ming Dai is never going to be the right one for you. You have to be careful around her. Do not let her become an obstacle in your life." Yun Yanli remained silent. Di Hao certainly did not seem like an ordinary child. He talked like a divine being who was overlooking a mortal that was beneath him. The boy's serious expression certainly startled Yun Yanli a little. However, he did not know how to respond at the time. Swiftly, Di Hao left them alone. Yun Yanli was still caught in bewilderment. The boy often caught him off guard with many unexplained occurrences. It was also pretty odd that Di Hao was the first to locate Ming Dai in this desolate corner. None of the things he said or did made any sense to Yun Yanli. Was he only saying all this because of his unpleasant encounters with Ming Dai? Or had he foreseen something in the future? While Yun Yanli was all caught up in his thoughts, Ming Dai finally recovered from her unconsciousness. Master, I am glad that you are safe." She became hopeful at the plain sight of Yun Yanli. Yun Yanli knew that Ming Dai was the most loyal companion that he could ever have. She was also the only one who truly cared for him. Therefore, he could not let her die. He helped her up. "Sit up. I will heal your wound." Ming Dai was so weak that she could not even sit up straight, but her eyes still shone with joy. She tried to steady herself to absorb the steady flow of energy from her back. Yun Yanli was transferring part of his spiritual power to revive her veins and vessels that were slowly dying away. Slowly but surely, signs of life returned to her ailing body. Yun Yanli had been quite distant to her for a while. They never really talked, as he seemed annoyed about the fact that she left the Shura world for him. Although Mingdai felt despaired, she refused to surrender. The more he pushed her away, the more motivated she became. She disregarded all of Yun Yanli's disapprovals and stayed by his side insistently. She was loyal and faithful and ever present to serve all of his needs. He finally showed kindness to her and even offered to drain his spiritual power to heal her wound. This could be a good start. Clearly, he was not entirely unmoved by her devotion. After an hour, the entire treatment was complete. Yun Yanli finally let go of his hands from her back. Without the support, Mingdai's body started to sway, and suddenly, she spat out a mouthful of blood. She seemed to be falling back to the ground. Yun Yanli reached out for her and supported her with his arm. Still not feeling well? Meanwhile, she supported her head on his chest. Mingdai's pale face clearly showed how uncomfortable she was. I feel terrible. Chapter 2739. Address me as your brother. Yun Yanli frowned and checked her pulse once again. He realized that there was no improvement in her injury, and she was still unable to move around by herself. She struggled to get up. I can walk. She spat another mouthful of blood after struggling for a moment. Yun Yanli remained silent but carried her in his arms. I'll get someone to check on you. He was not a medical expert, but common injuries were not something difficult for him. Nonetheless, he was helpless when it came to such severe injuries like hers. Mingdai rested in his arms while he carried her. She could finally lean on him. She had been waiting for this moment for years. That embrace belonged to her. No one could take it away. She would kill anyone that came in her way right now. Suddenly, she seemed to recall something. Where is His Highness Di Hao? She asked as she looked around. Did the dragon eat him? He left. Yun Yanli replied calmly. He did not want to talk about that kid right now. Mingdai was delighted that the annoying kid had gone. She could finally have some alone time with her master. That kid is too, she was going to say annoying, but she quickly changed her mind, too mischievous. His parents did not even bother to educate him. Yun Yanli's gaze darkened. Mingdai, stop judging. He is just a kid. As usual, Mingdai did not argue with Yun Yanli. Noted. I just feel that he does not look like a kid. What's worse is that he has been getting you into trouble. I'm mad that he made a mess. I'm sorry, he'll stop talking. Anyway, she was pleased that he had left. She knew that Yun Yanli did not love her, but that did not matter. She loved him, and she believed that love takes time to grow. Therefore, she was confident that Yun Yanli would fall in love with her one day. Yun Yanli silently leaped into the air with her in his arms. However, they almost crashed into someone on the way up. Xueyi. Xueyi was wearing a green robe, which made him look like a hermit. Similarly, he frowned in surprise as he saw Yun Yanli. He replied with a charming smile, Your Highness Yun, how are you doing lately? It's good to see you again. Oh dear, what happened to your subordinate? Did she get struck by a lightning bolt? Yun Yanli automatically had a bad headache when he saw him. He took a step back and replied, This has nothing to do with you. He then turned around and was ready to leave. Nonetheless, Xueyi stopped him with his flute. She looks terrible. Are you sure that you can treat her injuries? Yun Yanli got his message and quickly asked, Do you know how to heal her? Xueyi chuckled. I'm an expert in this field. Yun Yanli heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Xueyi's reply. Great. Can you treat her injuries? Xueyi was dissatisfied with his question. Is this how you beg for help? Yun Yanli tried to endure his wickedness despite the misery he was already facing. Could you please? Insincere. Yun Yanli clenched his fists secretly and added, What is considered sincere? What do you want? Yun Yanli knew that Xueyi would not be easy with him, and he had to go through a series of tortures if he needed his help. Xueyi pondered as he played with the flute in his hand. Address me as your brother. Yun Yanli immediately shouted, Are you sick? He knew that Xueyi was fooling him. Yun Yanli walked away without entertaining the request. Xueyi immediately added, Her blood vessels and nerves are severely injured. She will be dead in 3 months if she is not treated. Chapter 2740. Thinking about a wedding ceremony, Yun Yanli was still angry. However, he slowly turned around and asked, Are you sure you can treat her injuries? Of course. A hint of sarcasm still occupied Xueyi's eyes as he added, That's why you have nothing to lose by addressing me as your brother. Master, I don't want him to treat my injuries. Mingdai spoke with a weak tone as she pulled on Yun Yanli's sleeves. She tried so hard to get away from an annoying child but had to encounter another annoying person just shortly after. Yun Yanli looked at her for a moment before his gaze returned to Xueyi. Xueyi was staring at him with a smile on his face as if waiting to say something mean. An impatient man. Before he said something worse than that, Yun Yanli interrupted him. Brother, Xueyi was speechless. In fact, he was just joking with Yun Yanli. To his surprise, the man actually complied. He glanced at Mingdai and knew that Yun Yanli truly cared for his subordinate. Jokingly, he added as he looked at Yun Yanli, I finally know how much you care about her. It is to the extent that you can put your principles aside for a subordinate. Yun Yanli frowned. Stop the crap. Save her as you promised. Xueyi went to her and requested, Call me your husband. Yun Yanli's face went pale. Xueyi, are you a man? Breaking promises is not something a real man would do. Coldly, Xueyi laughed. I've never thought so highly of myself. In fact, breaking promises is very common among devils. Have you forgotten this? Yun Yanli's face turned dark as he turned away with Mingdai in his arm. He must have been insane to listen to Xueyi in the first place. He was not a trustworthy person. In fact, he might not even be capable enough to heal Mingdai. Perhaps he was just making fun of him. Only Fuyi could tame a man like him. Within seconds, Yun Yanli disappeared along with Mingdai. It wasn't easy for him to take her away so quickly since he only had one arm left. After watching him disappear, Xueyi shifted his gaze to the lotus root on his palm that was made of white jade. That was the she jade, a well-known herb that can heal and rejuvenate. Most importantly, it could help to fix broken limbs and make them grow again. Frankly, Xueyi was annoyed by the fact that Yun Yanli had lost an arm. He had been thinking about the jade ever since he heard about it from Fuyi. Finally, he was able to obtain one. Read the next chapter on our VIP novel. Nonetheless, his efforts seemed to be fruitless after all. He sighed as his fingers rubbed against the jade. It seemed that Yun Yanli did not appreciate the effort that he had made. I'm sorry, young man. I can't treat this type of injury. Young man, this lattice blood vessels and nerves are badly injured. Please look for other physicians. I can't help. I'm really sorry, I can't help. I don't think she will live for more than 4 hours. Young man, you should prepare for her funeral. Yun Yanli had visited a few medical stores with Mingdai. Unfortunately, none of the physicians could help. In the end, Yun Yanli decided to take a break. He was idling as he glimpsed at Mingdai, who was lying in his arm. This lady was the only one who cared about him. Did God really need to take her away from him? Mingdai was getting weaker, so she placed her hand on Yun Yanli's arm and tried her best to open her eyes. Master, am I going to die? Yun Yanli took a deep breath before replying, Perhaps, I have another solution. I will bring you to see Shijio. She can help. Mingdai frowned and shook her head at his remark. It's too late. She struggled to breathe before continuing her next sentence. I don't want you to beg her, she looked down on you. Chapter 2741. The obstruction at the wedding ceremony. The phrase struck Yun Yanli's face like a cane. Do you want to die? Mingdai closed her eyes slightly as she heard that familiar threat. My apologies, master. Yun Yanli was anxious and frustrated at the same time. He remained quiet as he strode forward without a direction. He pursed his lips as he was worried that Mingdai might just die silently as he continued walking. "Master, you've promised to marry me," Mingdai whispered. "I can marry you." Yun Yanli finally spoke after a long silence. Mingdai has done so much for him, so the least that he could do now was to fulfill her last little wish. Mingdai's eyes were opened widely. She had been dreaming this for a long time now, and it was finally coming true. Trembling, she tried to reach Yun Yanli's collar and grabbed it. "Could you please give me a wedding ceremony? Just a small one, so will do." It was challenging to organize a wedding ceremony within 4 hours. However, Yun Yanli would figure it out. Money could solve many problems. In addition, he was also good at threatening people. 3 hours later, the drummer, the red sedan, and a wedding officiant were prepared. Mingdai finally embarked on the red sedan. However, she was lying down as she could not even remain seated. A moment later, she was sent into a mansion. The mansion belonged to a rich man in the town. Coincidentally, the owner had the same surname. Yun Yanli saw a sign at the mansion with his surname carved on it. An hour ago, he threatened the owner of this family to lend him his mansion. Although he had given the man a good offer, he did not hesitate to threaten him as well. The owner of the mansion came from an ordinary family. How could he even say no to Yun Yanli? In the end, they agreed to lend the mansion to him and even helped him to put up the decorations. As everything was put together in such an ad hoc fashion, none of them had time to invite their friends or loved ones. Yun Yanli was slightly depressed as he carried Mingdai down from the sedan and walked into the wedding hall while the drummer was playing music in the background. Although Mingdai was extremely weak, she still tried her best to stay awake and looked at him as much as possible. Yun Yanli closed his eyes to hide his emotions as he noticed her face getting paler and paler. What if he proposed to marry his beloved when he was dying? Would his beloved try to fulfill his wish? It was unlikely. He was nothing in her eyes. She would not even frown even if he died in front of her. He smiled with grief and tried to stop thinking about all this nonsense now. However, before he stepped into the wedding hall with Mingdai in his arm, a man was floating around in the wedding hall. He was wearing a glamorous robe with light embroidery and carried a green flute in his hand while his arms were crossed in front of his chest. "Yun Yanli, you are fast. I can't believe that you're getting married again. Marrying someone is just like having a meal, I guess." Yun Yanli had a headache just seeing the man. "Xueyi, why are you here?" he asked in an icy tone. Xueyi smiled and added, "I'm a straightforward person. I'm not going to beat around the bush this time. You have 2 options now. You can continue marrying this little butterfly, and then we watch her die together, or you cancel the wedding ceremony now, and it'll save her life. However, you need to promise me that you will have a clean cut with her after I save her life. Your call." Chapter 2742, Xueyi's demand. Before Yun Yanli said anything, Mingdai interrupted him. "Master, I refuse to get any help from him. I would rather die. All I have ever wanted is the wedding." She would rather die in Yun Yanli's arms than to be removed entirely from his life. The separation was even more painful than death itself. Xueyi ignored her. His eyes were only locked on Yun Yanli. Yun Yanli gazed at him in return. "What do you want? Why must you stand between us?" Xueyi gave him a smile of mischief. "Yun Yanli, let me remind you that you and I are married by the grace of God. I must stop you before you cheat on me." "Xueyi, you are a man. Why are you messing around? I have no time for your silly jokes." Yun Yanli looked very annoyed. "I know very well that I am a man." Xueyi kept his composure and calmly replied, "However, who said that 2 men cannot get married?" The last remark angered Yun Yanli. "I am not gay." Xueyi rubbed his palms in delight. "Oh, but I am." Xueyi's tone irritated Yun Yanli. It was evident that he was furious now. Perhaps he would even unleash hell on Xueyi. Choosing not to piss the man off even further, Xueyi changed his attention to Mingdai, who was still lying helplessly in Yunyanli's arms. You can take your time to think about it. Very soon, perhaps the problem will be solved, and you will not even need to think about it anymore. With his teeth gritted tightly, Yunyanli answered without any delay, I am going for the second option. Now, save her life. You are taking advantage of my misfortune, Mingdai complained in a trembling voice. With his eyes squinted in delight, Xueyi answered scornfully, Little Mingdai, you are right. Taking advantage of situations is one of my favorite things to do. Mingdai answered furiously, You are shameless. Even if you can break us apart, my master will never marry you for real. Who says that he is going to marry me? I am going to marry him. Xueyi shook his finger at her while correcting her. Mingdai was dumbstruck that she could only utter a word, you. Out of anger, she finally conveyed what she had always wanted to say. You are only doing this for the sake of Gu Shijio, aren't you? She has already found the one that she loves, and yet she is still reluctant to let other men go. She had to send her son to disrupt us. Now it is your turn. Mingdai, stop speaking. Yunyanli was not pleased by her statement. At first, it was easy for Xueyi to sympathize with her ailing condition. However, her words completely changed his mind about saving her life. For what you have said, I should not even bother saving you life at all. What a mean assumption. I do not want to be saved by you. Mingdai was indeed stubborn. Xueyi gazed at her for a while before laughing sarcastically. Knowing me, I always like to do the complete opposite of one's will. The more you refuse it, the more I intend to see it happen. He waved his hand and launched a streak of light at her, and she passed out after spitting out another mouthful of blood. Yunyanli was triggered by the sudden strike. How could you? Swiftly, Xueyi placed his finger on his lips to signal him to remain silent. Hush. There is no making without breaking. I cannot help her if she stays awake. Quietly, Yunyanli observed the whole treatment from aside, as he was worried that Xueyi might play tricks on him. The Kuan was too tricky. He did not mean most of the things he said. Even the name that he first used to introduce himself to Yunyanli was not his real name. It was only much later that Yunyanli finally knew that his name was not Kuan Yunjan. He would not believe it if he did not hear his friends calling him by his real name. Nevertheless, this time, Xueyi did fool around. He was committed to delivering what he promised. Yunyanli watched everything from the side. He noticed that Xueyi's complexion changed to become quite pale and tired. It looked as if he was the one with the injury. When Xueyi's sleeves slipped off, his bare arm also caught Yunyanli's attention. Part of his skin seemed burnt with apparent wrinkles. Chapter 2743, Things That Should Have Happened. Surprised, Yunyanli took a step forward to take a better look, but just as he advanced, his burn had been covered by a piece of his clothes. Baffled, Yunyanli continued to watch Xueyi perform the operation quietly. He decided to force himself to believe that the Kun's nasty injury had nothing to do with him. The only thing he should care about now was Xueyi's ability to restore Mingdai's health. In another city, Di Hao was taking a break from his long journey. His exhaustion had prevented him from venturing any further. At first, the owner of the hostel was reluctant to accept the adorable child as a guest in his accommodation. Luckily, the little boy did not let his size limit him. He had certainly brought enough money with him. An ingot of shiny silver managed to draw the owner's attention away from questioning Di Hao's origin and family background. He was then assigned to the best guest room. Di Hao had an obsession with cleanliness, but this time around he was too tired to care. He took a quick shower and climbed onto the bed and lay comfortably on the sheets. The shower must have gotten him a little refreshed as he did not fall asleep immediately. Intently, he observed his hand, like there was something precious on his palm. After a moment, he heaved a sigh of relief. It appeared that the future had been changed a little. However, he was suddenly overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness, worried that his body might disappear any time now. Perhaps when the entire course of fate was changed, he would become non-existent and go back to where he truly belonged. He tried to recall his childhood again, but there was nothing else that he significantly remembered. At this point, there was only one possibility: his parents' destiny might have been changed, but there was no way he could tell if it was a good or bad change. Even though he came from the future, he had no way to predict what was going to happen. From what he could recall, he was already an orphan right after he was born. He had never met his parents and had merely stumbled through his childhood. When his spiritual power was high enough, he taught himself everything and could create magic from thin air. The boy managed to create a mirror that had the ability to allow one to look into their past, allowing him to look back upon the years when his parents were still alive. He dug into the past and found out everything that happened to his parents. From his vision, his mother and father never mended their fences in the Shuro world, as Yun Qingluo was there to put every obstacle in their way. Their misunderstanding snowballed. Although both of them managed to disarm the array formation that affected the entire Shuro world, they never managed to make peace with one another. Gu Shijio eventually left the Shuro world with grievance and returned to the Starry Crescent Land. By that time, Lan Weihu completely fell into Fan Qianqi's plot. The primary and secondary Venom finally took their forms. Lan Weihu died in agony while Yen Chen took his own life in the name of love. Obviously, Gu Shijio took a really bad knock when some of her closest friends died. Grief and resentment started to consume her, which led the primary and secondary Venom to get attached to her body. She managed to use her power as a great deity to purify the Venom, but not without difficulty. However, the evil aura that the Venom left behind was already disrupting her pregnancy. Eventually, the baby in her womb was turned into an evil being. The primary and secondary Venom was the most profound form of a devil, and its venom had affected Gu Shijio. She became a person of unpredictable moods with no self-control whatsoever. Day by day, the devil took over her from within. When Fuyi returned to the Starry Crescent Land, the Venom had already controlled Gu Shijio to an unreversible extent. Many innocent lives were lost due to her violence. The Starry Crescent Land had fallen into an abyss of miseries. Fuyi noticed her problem instantly, and after a series of violent battles, Fuyi finally defeated Gu Shijio. He wanted to purify the evil aura that had taken control over her, only to realize that the source of all evil was actually coming from the baby in her womb. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.